David, there's nothing out there. Nothing in the mist.
My friends, welcome back to another edition of Movie vs. Book. What's the difference? Sponsored by Unpopular Opinion. And today, boy, I've got a great video for you. So, you might not know this, but Stephen King is my favorite writer. I'm a big fan of his work, and he's written some of my favorite books. He's a bold writer, and is the embodiment of, we're all thinking it, I'm just saying it. He's a very creative guy with a really creative imagination, and his characters are fantastic. And generally speaking, when his work gets adapted for the screen, it transitions very well. Very few adaptations of his work came out as amazing, captivating, and incredible as The Mist. The Mist is a novella written by King that was adapted by friend and longtime collaborator Frank Darabont. If that name doesn't sound familiar to you, then let me list some of his most iconic works: The Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, and The Walking Dead. So clearly, this man has impacted pop culture significantly. So today, we're going to look at the differences between the two. So without any further ado, lock your doors, close your windows, because this is The Mist. Movie versus book. What's the difference? So to start this video off, I just want to say that this movie is a pretty faithful adaptation of King's novella. Most of the differences are changes in the anatomy or visuals of the monsters. Also, the film expanded upon certain elements of the book and added a few extra characters. For example, the character of Private Jessup and his relationship with Sally were both made up entirely for the movie, but for the most part, it's a solid adaptation with the core story and elements featured in the movie. However, there are two major differences between the movie and the book, one of which I'm certain most of you watching this already know about. The story of The Mist is straightforward, but anything from simple. An unnatural mist forms and engulfs a town, and with it comes monsters and creatures from another dimension. Townsfolk barricade themselves in a grocery store to try to survive, but slowly come to learn that the scariest monsters aren't the ones that lurk in the mist, but it's humanity itself. Anyway, in both book and movie, it starts in a nice town in Maine with our main character David Drayton. The book is narrated from David's point of view, and he explains how there was a brutal heat wave affecting this town of Bridgeton. Following the heat wave, there was a massive storm that wreaks havoc on the area, knocking out the power and causing a lot of destruction. The movie makes no mention of a heat wave, but it does show the storm and the devastation it caused. After the weather clears up, David takes his son to a grocery store to get some things, and he brings his neighbor, Brett Norton. David and Norton have a troubled past. In the movie, all we know is that they hate each other because they had a legal battle which David won in court. The book explains that it was actually a land dispute where Norton claimed David was encroaching on his property, but the court ruled in David's favor. Book Norton is a lot more sleazy and unlikable. He's a big shot lawyer from New Jersey who only lives in Bridgeton during the summer. Despite them not getting along, David drives him into town because a tree crushed Norton's car. Before they leave, David and his wife notice an eerie, unnatural white mist on the other side of the lake. In the movie, they do see the mist and make note of its bizarreness, but in the book, David gets a really bad feeling about it, considering that its very existence defied all the laws of nature. It was slowly moving across the lake towards them despite wind pushing against it, and its shape was in a perfect straight line, which nothing in nature is a perfectly straight line. However, David in both mediums says his goodbye to his wife, and they go. The book explains the difficulty of traveling on the roads after the storm due to the trees blocking the road, but eventually they get to the grocery store. The power is out all over the town, and phone lines are down, and the store is packed. But in the book, David manages to get a spot in the parking lot very close to the store's entrance, which is an important detail for later. Movie David, that's not really the case, but nevertheless, in both mediums, eventually the mist advances on the town. In the book, some townsfolk, they're really intrigued by it, and they want to go outside for a better look and even take pictures of it. In both movie and book, the town fire whistle goes off and emergency vehicles pass by. That's when people start to freak out, and an older man is bloodied up and runs into the store screaming, "Something in the mist! Something in the mist!" In the book, the mist slowly creeps up on the store, engulfing it and blocking out the sun, giving it the appearance of a silver coin. Then, lots of people try to run to their cars and disappear into the non-reflective mist. A shriek comes from the parking lot, and that's when people decide not to go into it. In the movie, the mist rapidly advances and swallows the town immediately, and only one man tries to make it to his car, and once the mist covers him, he screams instantly. Inside the store, the townsfolk have their theories as to what's happening, but decide it's best to stay indoors. Then then what feels like an earthquake shakes the joint and people are in full-blown panic. The novella explains how the mist has a bitter, really terrible smell to it, and it has an odd effect on sound. It muffles noises in it, and it makes things hard to hear. And this is where the book and the movie introduce us to Mrs. Carmody. She's an older local woman with a reputation of being an extreme religious zealot. In the book, even before the mist spreads through the town, she was warning people that going outside would kill them, saying, quote, "It's death out there," over and over. People are terrified, but one woman explains that she needs to get home to her kids, and despite everyone's warnings and no one willing to help her, she leaves. In the book, she's never heard from again. The store's manager, Bud Brown, doesn't grasp the severity of the situation and goes around reprimanding customers for not paying for food items they're eating. In the movie, Bud is kind of a dick, but he's not a dick of this extreme.
From the look of it, the tentacles are coming out of the beer cans.
All right, Bud, don't take our word for it. Go look.
Eventually, David goes to the back loading dock to find that the generator has malfunctioned and the lights shut off. Then he hears something that scares the crap out of him. In the movie, something bangs on the garage door many times from outside, sending him running. But in the book, he hears a weird slithering and sliding sound from outside. He runs into the assistant manager, Ollie, and two locals, Jim and Myron, and then the store's bag boy. They all make fun of him for being afraid when they go back to try to fix the generator. After some arguing and bickering, they open the door, and emerging from the mist and sliding into the store are a bunch of tentacles, which wrap around the bag boy and attack him. David tries to save the bag boy, but the tentacles are really strong, and it's no good. In the movie, Ollie jumps in to help, with Myron and Jim frozen with fear. But in the book, Ollie too is also petrified and doesn't try to help. In the movie, the tentacles are an ugly gray color with what looks like claws that are really sharp on its underside, with a hollow center that has an orifice like a mouth all throughout. It kind of looks like a sandworm or a deformed centipede, and it has the ability to rip and swallow flesh off of its victim. In the book, they're described as being very similar to giant squid tentacles, with big suction cups and them being extremely thick. They do, however, tear into the bag boy and make a trench in his flesh. He's dragged to his death out of the loading dock door, and they turn on the generator and the doors close again. A difference in the movie is David attacks the tentacles with an axe and cuts a chunk off of it before it slides away, but in the book, a full tentacle is severed when the door closes on it. And after a few punches are thrown, the guys calm down and realize that they're all in serious danger. In both mediums, they warn the store and show the tentacle to the non-believers, which in the movie it dissolves, whereas in the book it stays intact for the rest of the story. Most of the store is convinced that there's monsters outside, except for Norton and a few others. Everyone else begins to fortify the windows and doors with bags of dog food, fertilizers, mulch, and just about anything they can. When asked about weapons, a woman named Amanda Dumfries reveals that she carries a revolver, which they give to Ollie because he's the best shot. In the movie, she only has 2 speed loaders, which totals in 12 rounds, whereas in the book, she has a whole box of bullets. In the book, David and Amanda have a more intense relationship. Amanda is this really attractive woman who David thinks about constantly, and he catches himself staring at her a lot. Amanda is this very nurturing and caring woman, and she watches over David's son Billy, and the two have a deep connection and a lot of chemistry, and eventually the two
Shag.
In the movie, the two have chemistry, and there's something between them because Amanda is nurturing and motherly to Billy, and they really care about each other, but they don't have an affair, which I'm glad the filmmakers didn't take it there because I hate adultery and infidelity. In the book, David seems to have an amazing wife and a really happy relationship, and the fact that he cheats just pisses me off. There's the possibility his wife was dead at that point, but David didn't know that, so to me that's inexcusable. Sorry for that tangent, but I can't deny that's just where my head is coming from. After the store is in total lockdown, Mrs. Carmody preaches that the apocalypse is now and the world is being punished for its sins. A lot of people get angry with her because she's scaring everyone and she's taking things too far.
And if you don't shut up, I'll wrap this tape around your mouth.
She goes on to say that blood sacrifices are going to save them. She gets a smack in the face, and for the time being, she shuts up. Eventually, Norton and his group decide to leave and search for rescue. Everyone tries to persuade them to stay, but to no avail. David suggests that one of them should tie a rope to themselves just to prove to the store that they made it at least 300 feet away. In the book, one of Norton's followers agrees to do it, but in the movie, it was a bit different. A biker volunteers to retrieve a shotgun from another customer's truck and agrees to have the rope tied around his waist.
Son, you got brass balls. The shells are in the glove compartment. Drive it back.
The biker walks out of the store the same time Norton's group leaves, but not before giving this awesome send-off line.
I believe in God, too. I just don't think he's the bloodthirsty asshole you make him out to be.
Anyway, as they all leave, David and some other people feed the rope out of the door as the man tied to it advances into the mist, totally unseen. Then abruptly it jerks and it's being pulled viciously. In the book, the rope snaps, but in the movie they get control over it and pull it back to the store to reveal that the top half of the biker is missing and his torso is still attached to the rope and being dragged toward the store. In the book, all that's on the other end of the rope is blood, implying that Norton's group was attacked. In the movie, it's a little more ambiguous considering that the biker wasn't a part of the people leaving so much as he walked out the door the same time as them, but either way, it heavily implies Norton met a really awful end. Eventually night falls, and with it comes more creatures. Big flying bugs come to the store and they're drawn by the light coming from within inside. In the movie, these creatures have the anatomy of flies and chameleon-like eyes with stingers that administers a venom so toxic that not even Coyote Peterson would dare take a sting from it. But in the book, they're different. They're described as 2 feet long, segmented with a color of burnt pink flesh, and have 2 eyes on stalks. Also, it clung to the glass on sucker pads that left a slimy trail, much like snails do. Also, David makes note of something that's either a stinger or a reproductive organ protruding from the back of the animal's abdomen. After that, in both movie and book, another flying monster emerges from the mist. In both mediums, these other creatures, they're flying monsters and they look just like pterodactyls. In the movie, the monster breaks apart the window and the bugs and the pterodactyls swarm the store and attack a few people. However, in the book, only one pterodactyl manages to squeeze its way into the store from an already minor hole in the front window. It kills a person before David lights it on fire with a torch. One fly gets into the store, but it's promptly killed by Miss Repler when she sprayed it with Raid Bug Killer. However, in the movie, many monsters breach the store's window, and it's mayhem.
And you, bitch.
Ollie has to open fire with the gun to kill a pterodactyl. David torches one, and with considerable effort, it finally dies. One of the store employees gets stung on the neck by a bug and dies horribly. And a guy accidentally sets himself on fire trying to ignite a torch. And a fly lands on Mrs. Carmody, but it spares her, which is an important detail because it gives her further credit and influence as a messenger from God chosen to lead the survivors. Also, she predicted that the monsters would return at night, and as a result, more people begin to believe her and view her as divine. Either way, after the store is secure once more, everyone hunkers down for mourning. The next major action of the story is when a few survivors try to go to the pharmacy next door. For the most part, it's the same, but the context is a little different. In the movie, a band of survivors, including Dave, want to go to the pharmacy to get painkillers and medical supplies for the guy who was burned alive. But in the book, that's not the case. David bumps into Dan Miller, the old man who first screamed there was something in the mist, and Dan tells him that he's planning to leave the store because he's afraid of the influence Mrs. Carmody is gaining over the people. She's slowly gaining a following, and she's feeding off of their fear, vulnerability, and insecurity. So he suggests they go to the pharmacy next door as a trial run to see if they could make it out of the store and into the parking lot without getting attacked. When questioned why they plan to go to the pharmacy, they pretend it's because they want to get painkillers for an old lady who was trampled in a panic during the previous night. They enter the pharmacy to see a man in the doorway with his head gone, and they notice there are spider webs everywhere. Then out of the mist, they hear what sounds like a bullwhip, and a white cable-like strand wraps around one of the character's legs, and it melts through his flesh. More of these acidic webs are launched at the characters, but they manage to get out of the pharmacy and into the open. The acidic webbing kills the dude whose leg was cut after severing his femoral artery. Jim gets attacked and killed, and so does Dan Miller, by a giant spider-like creature. They're only called spiders for lack of a better term because these things had 12 or 14 legs and a weird orifice under its belly where the webbing came out. And they're the size of dogs. One other character gets hit by the web, and it melts through his throat and he dies. David and Ollie and Miss Repler manage to get back to the store alive. In the movie, the group sets out and they arm themselves and head for the pharmacy. They enter to find the door open and they proceed with caution. They raid the drug counters and they get what they need, but then they turn to the back half of the store and it's covered with webbing, and its human remains are strung all about like flies. They see one person who's still alive and they try to save him. He's a military police officer who was seen in the beginning of the movie with some soldiers who entered the store before the mist rolled in, and he keeps saying it's our fault, we did this. And before they can rescue him, the blemishes on his face burst and a small spider emerges from them. Then more spiders start coming out of those wounds, and then giant spiders attack them, and it's mayhem. Much like the book, the webs that are shot at the characters are extremely corrosive and wrap around one of the characters' legs and it kills them. The survivors fight the spiders, but so many keep emerging and the MP falls and his body bursts as thousands of baby spiders crawl from his remains. The characters flee, but one guy is left behind when he gets a web blast to the face and he's swarmed by the thousands of baby spiders and eaten alive. So movie Jim and Dan actually survive the encounter, whereas in their novella counterparts don't. So in both mediums, when the survivors return to the store, they inadvertently drive more people to side with Miss Carmody because she was opposed to them leaving in the first place, and the panic people are seeing all of her predictions come true, and she's offering them solutions, which in their panic-induced stress minds, they side with her and begin to listen and follow everything she says. She preaches her insane views on religion and how humanity must be forgiven by penance and expiation. Basically dark stuff. In the movie, Jim was so traumatized by the spider incident that he joins with Miss Carmody, while his friend Myron sticks with David. In the book, it's actually Myron who joins Carmody's gang, since Jim had died because of the spiders. This is when the movie characters decide it's time for them to leave. They plan to go get some groceries and make a dash for David's car, which can hold about 8 people. This is when the nature of the mist is revealed. David's group becomes suspicious of what the MP said in the pharmacy, it being their faults. So they question Private Jessup and find the 2 other soldiers with him had hung themselves. Before he can explain anything, he's attacked and brought before Mrs. Carmody. He reveals that at his military base, scientists were working on a secret military experiment called Project Arrowhead, which many locals have heard about, but they don't know the full details. He states that the scientists believe that other worlds existed and they're trying to create a window to other dimensions, but a screw-up had to have happened, and that ended up creating a doorway which led the monsters in the mist to come into our world. Mrs. Carmody blames Jessup for everything. She holds him responsible for the mist and claims that he violated the forbidden rules of nature and doing things only God has the power to do, such as
walking on the moon, splitting his atoms, and abortions!
Jessup is attacked on Carmody's orders, and he's thrown outside and fed to the monsters as a sacrifice. Now, this never happened in the book, but what actually took place a bit earlier in the story, right before the spider attack at the pharmacy, was Ollie discovered the 2 really young soldiers who were amongst the survivors in the store had hung themselves. This was seen in the movie, but again, it's a little different. He keeps this secret and only shows David. They hide the bodies and wonder why did they kill themselves. Ollie tells David that all throughout the summer, he's heard people talking about this mysterious Arrowhead project being done at a secret nearby military base. All the locals have their own conspiracy theories as to what's going on out there, but Ollie says he heard things from certain people, and he suggests that the 2 soldiers killed themselves because eventually people would start asking them questions and they feared what people might do to them when they found out the truth. Ollie tells David that maybe the Arrowhead project accidentally ripped a hole into another dimension, but David is doubtful. But the movie straight up confirms the nature of the mist, and it tells us that it's because of the Arrowhead project, whereas in the book it leaves it ambiguous and up for interpretation. Also, having Mrs. Carmody's congregation sacrifice Jessup in the movie was done to show the influence she had over the people in the store and to highlight the statement made earlier.
You throw people in the dark, no more rules. You'll see how primitive they get.
Long story short, the final confrontation is more or less exactly the same. Mrs. Carmody's followers discover David's group's plan to leave the store and they surround him. She declares how God is punishing the world because of people like them and orders her people to sacrifice Amanda and David's son Billy. A scuffle breaks out and there's an intense standoff. In the book, Myron is facing off against David, while in the movie, Myron is fighting alongside David, and it's actually Jim in the movie who's trying to get Billy. Ollie shoots Mrs. Carmody and her followers scatter in fear. In the book, Ollie shoots her once in the stomach, but in the movie, it takes 2 shots to kill her. They make their escape to David's car and dash into the parking lot. Now, in the movie, Myron breaks his ankle during the getaway and is carried by Bud and one other guy. Myron is mauled by a spider, Ollie's eaten by a giant crab monster, and the other dude trying to help Myron is killed by the spiders. Bud turns around and runs back to the store, begging the people to let him in, and surprisingly they do. Dan Miller, Miss Repler, Amanda, Billy, and David get to the car and drive away, not before retrieving the gun Ollie dropped. That's pretty much how it happened in the book, except by this point, Dan Miller was already dead, and Myron was not in David's group, and also, Bud Brown chose not to go with them, but to stay with his store. Only David, Billy, Amanda, and Miss Repler make it to the car. In both movie and book, they drive off into the mist in hopes of clearing it and reaching safety. Movie David manages to drive to his house, and he sees his wife was killed by the spiders. In the book, David tries to drive home to get his wife, but many trees had fallen and blocked the road. He contemplates what to do, but decides after great hesitation to leave her behind. He didn't want to risk getting his car stuck or crashing when there was a possibility his wife could be dead, so he drives off. And this is where we get to the biggest change, the infamous ending. The movie ending is way different from its source material, but what happens in the book is David and crew have driven a vast distance and still haven't escaped the mist. And one night, David is listening to the radio and he thinks he hears someone say Hartford. He doesn't know if he heard it or if he imagined it, but that one word gives him hope that Hartford, Connecticut is some kind of safe haven or a place of refuge. So with hope in his heart, he drives off. and the end is very ambiguous. In the movie, David drives his car until it runs out of fuel. Everyone is silent and they know that they're doomed. So, not wanting to die a horrible death from the monsters outside, they decide to go out on their own terms. With the last 4 bullets in the gun, David mercy kills Dan, Amanda, Miss Repler, and his son Billy. Not having a bullet for himself, he exits the car so the monsters can kill him. But the mist clears up, and the United States military clears the area with tanks and flamethrowers, killing the monsters and evacuating survivors. David sees that the woman who left the store in the beginning of the movie to get home to her kids is still alive. So, had he waited literally 2 minutes, everyone in the car would have survived and been rescued. In terms of endings, they're both really good. You know, for the book, it leaves us wondering if the whole world is covered in the mist. Is everyone dead? What happened to the people in the grocery store? And what's gonna happen to our main characters? But it gives us a hopeful outro, and that they're all gonna be okay. I like the movie ending because it gives concrete answers to all those questions. It shows the mist clearing up, shows the military is winning and fighting back against the monsters, and the people in the grocery store, they're gonna be okay, they're gonna live, and the whole world was not engulfed by the mist. But overall, I'm gonna have to say I like the movie ending better. Well, guys, that's about it. Those are the differences between The Mist, movie and book. Were you surprised by the differences? How did you feel about the infamous ending, and what was your reaction? Comment that below, because I want to know. Remember, if you like this video, subscribe, and drop a like. And as always, if there's another adaptation out there you want me to compare to its source material, well, comment that below as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next, well, sort of unpopular opinion.